The U.S. Special Envoy Tim Linderking says Houthis are not committed to peace. The United Nations spokesperson reports that Hans Grundberg informed Iranians that escalation in Marib must stop. As the war extends, millions of Yemeni children are out of schools. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rana Swalam. The U.S. envoy to Yemen, Tim Linderking, said that Houthi militia has not shown a real commitment to the peace process so far. In an interview with the Sharq al-Awsat newspaper from Washington, Linderking indicated that his efforts contributed to building an international and regional consensus on the need for an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire and activating a political solution. The U.S. envoy pointed out that Yemeni and Saudi governments announced their support for the ceasefire and the resumption of political talks, stressing the Sultanate of Oman's decisive and proactive regional role. Linderking added that the Houthi militia continues to obstruct peace and exacerbate the humanitarian crisis, noting that this makes it difficult for the international community to end the conflict, stressing his commitment to achieving peace. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grundberg, concluded a visit to Iran, where he met with senior Iranian officials and representatives of the international community in Tehran. The UN envoy expressed his concerns over the escalating military activity in Yemen, which is causing significant civilian casualties, including children. The United Nations said its Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grundberg, stressed in his meetings with senior Iranian officials the urgent need to support UN efforts to reach a negotiated settlement of the conflict. According to the UN spokesperson Eric Kaneko, Grundberg stressed the urgent need for de-escalation throughout Yemen, including Marib. She added that the UN envoy discussed requirements to address the deteriorating humanitarian and economic situation and the importance of ensuring free movement of people and goods within and throughout the country.
Serious concern over the escalating military activities in Yemen, which are causing significant civilian casualties, including children, and are undermining peace efforts. He underscored the urgent need for de-escalation in all of Yemen, including Marib. He further discussed the need to address the deteriorating humanitarian and economic situation in Yemen and the importance of ensuring freedom of movement of people and goods into and throughout the country.
Meanwhile, the Secretary General spokesperson Eric Kaneko said that the United Nations and its partners have continued to provide life-saving assistance to civilians affected by conflict in Marib, Al-Bayda and Chabwa since the escalation of fighting in these governorates in September of this year. Kaneko added that the United Nations continues to call for an end to military escalation, working with involved parties to ensure that critical aid partners reach civilians.
This year. In October, aid agencies provided assistance on both sides of the front lines, including food aid to 2,100 families in Al Abdiya district, 12,400 families in the Al Wadi area of Marib, and 40,000 families in Marib city. Additionally, the UN Population Fund has delivered emergency relief to newly displaced persons affected by the fighting in Marib and surrounding governorates. In October, nearly 100,000 displaced people received assistance that included hygiene items, ready-to-eat food rations, and female dignity kits. The UN continues to call for an end to military escalations and has been engaging with the parties to the conflict to ensure that aid partners have the necessary access to civilians stranded between rapidly shifting front lines.
Brigadier General Tariq Mohammed Abdullah Saleh met today with Mr. Richard Oppenheim, the UK ambassador to Yemen. During the meeting, they discussed continued escalation of Houthi militias in Marib, West Coast and other fronts, and the responsibility of the international community to achieve peace in the country. The meeting also discussed international sanctions imposed on Ali Abdullah Saleh and his son, Ambassador Ahmed Ali, and what the United Kingdom can do to bring down these sanctions. Houthi landmines continue to claim the lives of innocent civilians across the country. Some international reports have even described Yemen as the largest mine-inflicted zone since the Second World War. More details on this are within the following report.
Over the course of 3 years, more than 20 foreign mine clearance experts tasked with demining Houthi mines have lost their lives. The number of casualties was released amid figures that presented the scope of the project carried out in Yemen as part of the Saudi Project for Landmine Clearance, MASAM. According to MASAM's director, the project's field crew has removed 263,797 landmines, unexploded artillery shells, and other lethal explosive devices. Bomb squads dealt with 169,792 unexploded ordnances, 83,943 anti-tank mines, and 3,984 anti-personnel mines, spanning 25 million square meters of Yemeni territory since the program's inception until July 23rd of this year. As for the Yemeni government, the Iran-backed Houthis have laid over 1 million landmines throughout the country since the conflict began 6 years ago, making it the most mined country since World War II. In March, the Yemeni Observatory on Landmines published statistics that showed that devices planted by Houthis in Taiz alone had killed and injured 3,263 civilians. Data from the Yemeni Coalition to Monitor Human Rights Violations showed 1,929 civilians, including 357 children and 146 women, have been killed in the past 6 years, and 2,242 civilians, including 519 children and 167 women, have been left disabled due to Houthi landmines. Houthi deadly mines seem to continue to claim innocent lives, with no real pressure applied from the international community.
To Shabwa, people of Usailan organized a protest denouncing the handover of districts to Houthi militia. During the protest, they called for the liberation of the 3 districts from the militia. Protesters stressed on the speedy implementation of the Riyadh Agreement. To the south of Ma'rib, government forces backed by resistance deter Houthi militia and regain strategic sites within the area. According to the sources, government forces regained positions in Dana front after a violent attack that inflicted heavy human and material losses on the militia. Houthi militia bombed towers of 2 communications networks in Jabal al-Balq area with a ballistic missile, which led to communications disruptions in Ma'rib city and Ma'rib al-Wadi. The Yemeni government described what happened as a sinful targeting pursued by Houthi militia, as they deliberately continue targeting of infrastructure. It called on the international community, the United Nations, and the UN and US envoys to condemn Houthi acts, especially in Ma'rib, that has exacerbated the suffering of Yemenis. To that end, the coalition in Yemen announced 29 operations targeting Houthi militia on different fronts of 3 governorates during the past 24 hours. The coalition confirmed that operations on Al-Bayda, Sirwah, Ma'rib, and Al-Jawf destroyed 16 military vehicles and killed about 126 Houthi elements. This comes 48 hours after another 32 operations carried out by the coalition that killed 145 militia members. Violent confrontations resumed on a number of battlefronts in Al-Bayda and Lahj. The popular resistance forces took up fierce clashes with Houthi militia elements stationed in Jabal Ramadan in Al-Zahir. Likewise, clashes raged between southern resistance and Houthi militia on Al-Had Yafa front in Lahj. Houthi militia suffered heavy losses in the clashes on the 2 fronts. Turning to Hudaydah, the joint forces dealt with violations committed by Houthi militia east of the city. A military source said that joint forces directed focused strikes on hideouts and barracks of Houthi militia, which targeted residential areas in Al-Saleh east of Hudaydah. In Al-Jah, joint forces monitored the Houthi rebel infiltration attempts and inflicted heavy losses among them. The 7-year war in Yemen has caused complete damage to infrastructure, especially in the sector of education. UNICEF spoke about 3 million children being out of school, making them liable to be abused or even recruited to fight. More information within the following report.
After 7 years of conflict, children's education has become the biggest casualty of the war in Yemen. According to a UNICEF report which revealed that more than 2 million children, boys and girls of school age, are out of school due to poverty, conflict, and lack of educational opportunities. This is more than double the number of children out of school in 2015, when there were 890,000 children. In a recent UNICEF report released in July on the impact of conflict on children's education in Yemen, concern is growing that out of school or recently dropped out children may never go back to school if they are not properly supported. Access to a quality education is a fundamental right of every child, including girls, displaced children, and people with special needs. The conflict has severe impacts on all aspects of children's lives, but access to education provides them with a sense of normalcy, even under the harshest conditions, and protects them from all kinds of exploitation. Therefore, keeping children in school is critical to their future and the future of Yemen. Girls are forced into early marriage as they become trapped in a cycle of poverty and squandering their potential. Boys and girls are also more vulnerable to the practice of recruitment into the fighting with Houthis, as over the past 7 years, more than 3,600 children have been recruited in Yemen. The effects of the continuation of the conflict in Yemen, in addition to the recent attack on education represented by the corona pandemic, will not only affect the education sector, but it will affect all sectors in Yemen.
Coming next. Yemenis who can escape being killed in the war are chased by a second war, that is poverty.
راتب الواحد 120 ألف، والكيس الدقيق ب18 ألف، والكيس السكر اليوم ب20 ألف. كم يعني بيعطي هذا الراتب كامل بكيس سكر وكيس دقيق؟
المواطن اليمني يعيش في أزمة إنسانية وغذائية مؤلمة من غلاء الأسعار وفحشة الأسعار وغلاء الصرف والعملة الأجنبية في البلد.
حالتي الحين حالة لما أخرج المنديل 12 كيلو ما نقدرش ناكل الأكل الداخل، ما إحنا بحاجة صعبة.
Welcome back. The consequences of this ongoing war are dire. Poverty tops such consequences. It seems that Yemenis who could escape being killed in the fire of war can die out of starvation. More details on this story are within the following report.
Since 2014, war has driven poverty in Yemen from 47% of the population to a projected 75% by the end of 2019. If the fighting continues through 2022, Yemen will rank as the poorest country in the world, with 79% of the population living under the poverty line and 65% classified as extremely poor. The war has already made Yemen the largest humanitarian disaster and now threatens to make its population the poorest in the world. In North Hajjah, Ashwaq Mahmoud is a nurse that helps the poor. Ashwaq was working with UNICEF as a nurse and saved her allowances to build a hospital for the poor.
What pushed me to do this is the people's needs, as they are very poor due to the deteriorating living conditions. In addition to the motive behind my move is that the nearest hospital to my village is very far, and the challenges I faced is that there were no any government or private support.
More than 80% of Yemen's roughly 30 million people require humanitarian assistance and protection. This puts Yemen in a huge risk, as if war remains through 2030, the costs will be borne by new generations to come, with poverty seeding more deeply, institutions destroyed, and Yemen more vulnerable to an ongoing and brutal cycle of conflict and suffering.
In Aden, home gas supply stations witnessed long queues with a new rise in selling prices. Sources confirmed that the price of a single gas cylinder rose to 12,500 riyals, an increase of 500 riyals over the past 24 hours, and an increase of more than 200 in less than a week. However, gasoline was available during the past 48 hours at some gas stations, but price is still high, as 20 liters of gasoline are sold for more than 24,000 riyals. Many cities have witnessed severe home gas shortages, especially in the Houthi-controlled areas. This has added another burden on citizens who find themselves helpless to feed their families. More on this in the following report.
Residents of the Yemeni capital and the rest of the areas under the Houthi militia control are suffering from a stifling crisis in domestic gas, with this substance available on the black market at very high prices. The selling price of 14-liter gas cylinder on the black market has reached 14,000 Yemeni riyals. According to local media, the Houthi militia relies for domestic gas on shipments transported by land from the safer fields in Ma'rib Governorate, while it imports gas for cars from outside Yemen. In the midst of a stifling crisis that Yemenis are experiencing in Houthi-controlled areas as a result of the scarcity of cooking gas, the militias imposed new taxes on each family under the name of supporting the fronts, as a part of a plan to sort the population to find out who supported them from the opponents, according to what residents said of the kidnapped capital, Sana'a. With the price of gas cylinders on the black market run by dealers and militia leaders rising to double the official price, neighborhood officials who were entrusted with the task of distributing cylinders that are sold at semi-official prices to all families sent empty envelopes asking to donate in favor of supporting the fronts and write the name of the donor and the amount and his phone number on the parcel and return it upon receipt of the cylinder, which is distributed once a month. According to sources, the militia's goal in this step, besides collecting money, is to collect information about every house and neighborhood. The population is under different names with the power of authority and did not exclude even the poor, who delegates go to their homes to take their roads and ask families to donate to fight under the name of sacrifice to the Mujahideen. Houthi rebels keep interfering in all sectors. People just want to lead a normal life with no complications.
The Central Bank of Yemen suspended 8 companies and exchange facilities in Ma'rib after reviewing their accounts. According to a statement, this decision came at the end of numerous violations to push back against exchange market offenders and to take necessary legal measures against them. This brings the number of companies that were closed in government-controlled areas to 74 companies. The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 12 new cases of the COVID-19 in 2 governorates. Committee officials said on Twitter that 11 cases were recorded in Aden and 1 in Hadramaut. Also 4 deaths were recorded plus 6 recovered cases. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 9,843, including 1,905 deaths and 6,486 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. The U.S. Special Envoy Tim Linderking says Houthis are not committed to peace. The United Nations spokesperson reports that Hans Grunberg informed Iranians that escalation in Ma'rib must stop. As the war extends, millions of Yemeni children are out of schools. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.